Our theme for this year is equipping the saints for the work of ministry, for the building up of the body of Christ. Building each other up, helping each other to serve. Sometimes we feel a little bit strapped, especially in smaller congregations. I talk about that a good bit here. And there was an interesting question that was posed by a friend of mine on Facebook the other day, and she asked this question: how would you bless others if you had $1 million? Kind of an interesting question, right? And just so happens I have $1 million floating around, so don't be jelly. These are the dollars that Mike Leck gave before he died, that he wanted passed out. Obviously fake. But it's an interesting question, right? What would you do, or how would you bless people if you had $1 million? You can shout some things out. What would you guys do with it? Give it to needy people. That was one of the answers that came back. What are other things? Okay, so interesting thing. One of my professors talked about this in graduate school, about the importance of trusting other people with funds. And in the book of Acts, they took all the money that people had gotten from selling possessions and selling fields and things like that, and they laid it at the apostles' feet. Obviously, a big amount of trust with that. And then in wisdom, they dispersed that as they saw need. What are some other things? Pay off debt. Yeah, that was one of the suggestions in the comments. I thought that was interesting. Paying off my debt first and then paying off other people's debt.
Song keeps going through my head. I don't even like water, but I feel like it's a boat.
You what?
It's a boat, right?
What's a boat?
You're supposed to buy a boat.
Oh, I see. I'm a little slow today. Yeah. Buy a boat, because you never know, right? We're not talking about a yacht, Macy. Like a boat to rescue people. What'd you say, DP? Bail money for Betty. That's a good idea. That's a wise use of money. This is kind of an interesting question because it really makes us think that we live a lot of times in hypotheticals. If only I had this money, I would, right? If only I had this massive amount of money, I could serve more people. I could eliminate debt. I could buy houses. I could help people out if only I had money. While it's not a bad question, the reality is, with the exception of fake $1 million, nobody's ever going to give us $1 million, right? If you remember the song, kind of a weird Canadian group from back in the early 90s, Bare Naked Ladies, you remember their song, If I Had $1 Million? I want to read their lyrics because it's kind of silly. It was a fun song that they did. And they did this song just playing together and ad-libbing. So they just literally ad-libbed, and they started writing down what they thought were the funniest lyrics to this song. So here's what they settled on. If I had $1 million, we'd buy you a house. I would buy you a house. If I had $1 million, I'd buy you furniture for your house. Maybe a nice Chesterfield or an ottoman. And if I had $1 million, we'd buy you a K car. Do you guys remember the old Dodge K cars? You remember the K car. We used to ride around in a K car, like one of the most unreliable pieces of garbage. They were just so cheap. And the next line, a nice Reliant automobile. If I had $1 million, I'd buy your love. If I had $1 million, I'd build a tree fort in our yard. If I had $1 million, you could help. It wouldn't be that hard. In other words, you could help build it. If I had $1 million, maybe we could put a little tiny fridge in there somewhere. We could just go up there and hang out, like open the fridge and stuff. It's hilarious. And there'd be all foods laid out for us, like little pre-wrapped sausages and things. They have pre-wrapped sausages, but they don't have pre-wrapped bacon. Well, you can blame them, yeah. If I had $1 million, well, I'd buy you a fur coat. But not a real fur coat, that's cruel. If I had $1 million, Well, I'd buy you an exotic pet. Yep, like a llama or emu. If I had $1 million, well, I'd buy you John Merrick's remains. Apparently, these lines are like a play on Michael Jackson, because Michael Jackson had actually bought like these exotic animals and apparently bought John Merrick's remains. John Merrick was, he was known as Elephant Man, and they cremated him, and apparently Michael Jackson apparently bought some of his remains. Oh, all them crazy elephant bones, and if I had $1 million, I'd buy your love. If I had $1 million, we wouldn't have to walk to the store. If I had $1 million and we take a limousine because it costs more. If I had $1 million, we wouldn't have to eat Kraft dinner, but we would eat Kraft dinner. Of course, we wouldn't just, we'd just eat more, and we'd buy really expensive ketchups with it. That's right, all the fanciest Dijon ketchups. If I had $1 million, well, I'd buy you a green dress, but not a real green dress. That's cruel. If I had $1 million, well, I'd buy you some art, a Picasso or Garfunkel. If I had $1 million, well, I'd buy you a monkey. Haven't you always wanted a monkey? If I had $1 million, I'd buy your love. If I had $1 million, if I had $1 million, if I had $1 million, I'd be rich. So it's just kind of a silly song. And I think what they're doing is just showing the absurdity of, you know, like getting money doesn't make you do anything special or phenomenal. So having money doesn't, it's kind of silly, right? Because that doesn't change you. And maybe a better question would be, if you really want $1 million, what are you doing right now to receive $1 million, to earn $1 million? But maybe a better question yet is, here are some things. We mentioned some of these. Buy a house, pay off debt, open a shelter, send them to school. But I think this is probably a better question, right? What are you doing right now with what you have? And I don't know why I picked this picture. It was really random. There is no deep theological reason for why I picked this picture. But the question is, what are you doing right now with what you have? Because in these comments, people are like, well, if only I had $1 million, I would buy a women's shelter, and I would house these women who are in desperate need to get away from domestic violence situations. The question is, are you volunteering right now in existing women's shelters? Are you spending your time there? If I had $1 million, I would buy a house for somebody. Are you using your house right now to help shelter people who need it, or at least to be hospitable for people who don't have nice houses to be in? Do you provide a meal for them and give them respite for a little bit? What are you doing right now with what you have? See, a lot of churches get caught in the same kind of mentality, and we say, if only we had these resources, if only we had a better budget, if only we had more volunteers, if only we had more people in the pews, if only we had this, if we had that, if we had property, and on and on and on the list goes. But the question is, the right question is, what are we doing right now with what we have? Because money doesn't change your heart. Steve Harvey talks a lot about his humble beginnings, and I just love hearing Steve's story about he literally came from nothing. And in his 30s, in his late 30s, Steve was literally homeless. He was living in his car. And he's very humble when he tells the story, and he says, it was people who gave me a break, who gave me a place to sleep when I had nowhere but my car. That's what helped me to push forward. But he said in the end, it wasn't handouts. It wasn't people just giving me stuff. It was me working hard. He said, I worked my tail off to get to where I am. But it was people who were hospitable along the way, who did nothing more than just believe in me and provide a place for me to sleep. That's what changed his life. And he talks about money because people asked him, you know, how has being extremely wealthy and famous, how has that changed you? And he said, it hasn't. Money doesn't change people. Money doesn't change people. Getting money doesn't change people. It only highlights who you already are. How you use that money already highlights who you are. So it's kind of interesting. You know, I think about this question a lot. What would be the perfect scenario for churches with limited or no resources to thrive? Well, it turns out we have the answer in Acts chapter 2. I've preached on this before, but I think it's always good to talk about it and bring it up because it's so important and it's so simple. In Acts chapter 2, verses 42 through 47, it says this, "And they devoted themselves." And by the way, I don't know of one successful person, not one successful person anywhere, that doesn't say, getting to where I am took extremely hard work and dedication. Nobody was just given success. Some people inherit businesses, sure, but they weren't given success. They still have to work hard. They have to work to build things up. They have to be extremely devoted. Most people who are successful started with nothing. They started somewhere with little to no resources whatsoever. And they devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching and to the fellowship, to the breaking of bread. Did you hear this? There was devotion to this. It wasn't like every now and then. It wasn't like, well, when we're able to squeeze it into the schedule. The early Christians were devoted to these things. That means that they were committed and that they said, we may not see the fruits now, but eventually we will see the fruits of sitting at the feet of the apostles, listening to teaching, to fellowship, spending time with each other, committed to spending time with each other, breaking of bread, sitting down and eating together, and to the prayers, praying together. And awe came upon every soul, and many wonders and signs were being done through the apostles. And all who believed were together and had all things in common. And they were selling their possessions and belongings and distributing proceeds to all as any had need. Do you hear what's happening? They didn't say, man, if only we had $1 million, we could help the poor out. What did they do? They said, let's take what we have right now, let's sell it, and let's help people out who are poor. They took what they had right then and there, they sold it, they took that money, and they helped people in need. No excuses, no hypotheticals. They just did it. They were selling their possessions and belongings and distributing the proceeds to all as any had need. And day by day, in other words, every day, attending the temple together and breaking bread in their homes. Every day they did this. They received their food with glad and generous hearts, praising God and having favor with all the people. Whoop. And the Lord added to their number day by day, that is, every day, those who are being saved. You see, there's growth and there's success when there's devotion and dedication. Period. God blesses that. There's an interesting phenomenon that's happening all over the nation right now. And it's quite frankly pretty scary. Not only I just had this conversation yesterday, and she said, I'm looking at what's coming up, in a few weeks. And she's like, I'm actually starting to freak out a little bit because they're going to be so short-staffed at her job. People can't find employees. They have their summer help is leaving. People are going back to school. This is happening all over the nation. Every single restaurant that I've been to in the last 2 months has signs posted, please be patient with us. We can't find any employees. Everywhere. It's everywhere. And it's just about every job. They're so short-staffed right now. And part of that, I think it's probably a big part. I don't know statistically what part. But a big part of that is people are still living on unemployment. They would rather live on unemployment and receive those funds than to seek employment, because employment, I guess, I'm speculating here, but employment means hard work. It means devotion. It means dedication. It means that you have to show up. You have to wake up. You have to show up. You have to put your best foot forward, and you have to work. And there's no glamour in that. You don't get vacation days often when you're going to work, right? When you're punching a clock, you don't get vacation days. Not like you do on unemployment. So we have this issue, and I think it's because we get sometimes caught in these hypotheticals. If only I had all this money. If only I had all these resources. If only I had this help from other people. I could ... fill in the blank. But the reality is we have so many resources right now. Our congregation, other congregations. We have so many resources at our fingertips right now. And if you take a second and just look around the room, I know it's awkward, but take a look around the room. Every single person in here is a resource to help people in need. Every one of us. And I get excited about that. I don't know about you guys, but I get pretty excited about that. Because this is the model. These are the ingredients for a healthy church. And it's not difficult. It just requires people being devoted and giving up their time and not laying claim to their own money, saying that this is all mine. I'll give what's left over if I have any left over, but the rest of it is mine. These people weren't possessive with their possessions. They freely gave to people in need. They found a way. It doesn't mean that they spent themselves into oblivion and they themselves became homeless. It doesn't mean that. It doesn't say that. It doesn't imply that. But people gave generously of their proceeds because they said, this isn't mine. This earth is temporary. Life is short. The possessions we have don't belong to us. God has blessed us with them. God's blessed us with our jobs, with our health, with our homes, with our food, with our water. God has blessed us with those things. Those are His that He gave us. And so when we start giving and we start sharing and we start being generous with our time and our resources, it genuinely helps people and it moves people. People are moved by that. And I think that's why day by day, every single day, God was adding to the church's number. He was adding to those who were being saved because people were moved by that. And people wanted to become dedicated. People wanted to become disciples. People wanted to be a part of a church. People wanted to help serve other people. People wanted to learn how to serve other people. And that cycle keeps going, and it's exciting. There are a lot of really cool things that are going on right now across the country, and I get motivated by it. I get excited by it. And I'm quite frankly excited about where this church is headed and the potential that we have because people are already generous. I look around the room and I look at the generosity that people have here with their time, with their resources. And some of us don't have a whole lot of resources to share. But you guys share anyway. And I think that's super exciting. It's very cool. So I just want to encourage you with that message and go back and look at the scriptures and be devoted. Be devoted. Don't give up. If there's anybody this morning who has any prayer needs or anybody who's not yet taken that step to put Christ on in baptism, we would invite you to come up as we all stand and sing a song together.